Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're enthusiastically tackling one of the most baffling, brain-twisting puzzles in the entire English language. You know the one, if you ask a native speaker to explain why they say what they say, they'll usually just shrug, look kind of confused, and tell you, well, it just sounds right. We are talking about the wild, seemingly illogical world of travel prepositions. Specifically, we're going to unpack exactly how to use prepositions for every single means of transport you can imagine, from cars and buses to trains, aeroplanes, and even e-rickshaws.
Okay, let's dive into this incredibly common point of confusion. Picture your morning commute, right? You're getting a ride to work. If your friend picks you up, you get in the car. But if you take public transit instead, you get on the bus. Why? Honestly, think about it for a second. Both of these vehicles have wheels, windows, and seats. Both are basically just giant metal boxes. And both are taking you to the exact same destination. Yet for some mysterious reason, the English language treats them as completely different physical spaces.
Now, if you've ever found yourself saying, "I'm in the bus," please do not feel bad about it. At first glance, the correct version feels completely unnatural. I mean, a bus has a roof, walls, and a door. You are undeniably inside of it. So why does English demand that you say you're on it? When you say, "I'm on the bus," a literal translation in your head might make you picture yourself strapped to the roof of the vehicle, holding onto your briefcase for dear life while flying down the highway. It's a struggle for sure, and totally understandable why it feels so wrong.
Well, to make you feel a little better about this mix-up, a major study published in the TESOL International Journal shows that native language interference is the real culprit here. They call it a mismatch problem. Basically, when you learn English, your brain automatically tries to apply the structural rules of your first language, your L1, to your second language. This is what they mean by L1 collocation patterns. In plain terms, your brain is just copy-pasting the grammar of your native tongue directly over English vocabulary. Because English has such specific and sometimes strange rules, your brain naturally rebels. So take a deep breath. It's not you, it's the language.
Moving right along to Section 1, the spatial logic of prepositions.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that it shows we need a complete paradigm shift to conquer this paradox. We have to stop relying on rote memorization and blind translation and start understanding spatial, physical relationships the way English categorizes them. We have to really think about the space around us. Let's look at this brilliant framework from English Club. It breaks down spatial logic into three simple concepts. We use at for a specific point, like at the corner. We use in for an enclosed space, like in a box, and we use on for a surface, like on the wall. This spatial mapping is literally the foundational blueprint for everything we're about to discuss today.
Let's physically visualize this. I want you to imagine your body in these spaces right now. Ask yourself, are you boxed in or are you resting on top of something? This is the container rule versus the surface rule. Imagine physically touching these boundaries. If you can stretch your arms out and touch walls enclosing you on all sides, you're in a container. But if your feet are just planted on a floorboard, or you're interacting with a flat area that you rest upon without being trapped by walls, you are on a surface. Getting this physical sensation down is absolutely crucial. Which brings us to Section 2, writing, cars versus buses. So how do these container and surface rules actually dictate the way we talk about cars and buses? Well, it starts with private enclosed transport. For small vehicles like a car, a taxi, a helicopter, or a small boat, you use in. Why? Because when you sit in a car, you're confined to a specific seat. The doors close around you, the roof is right above your head, and you're essentially boxed in. You can't stand up and stretch your legs, the vehicle encloses you perfectly, acting exactly like a container. Therefore, following our logic, you are definitively in the car.
But here is where the magic happens. A real game changer, the public transport exception. According to the experts at Preply, the key to this rule is physicality. It's not just about who owns the vehicle. It's about how your body moves inside of it. I want you to ask yourself, can you stand up and walk around inside the vehicle while it's moving? If the answer is yes, if the vehicle is large enough that it has a floor you can step onto and walk across, the English language stops treating it as a container and suddenly starts treating it as a flat surface.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why we use on for large modes of public transport. When you board a bus, a train, an airplane, or a ship, you are stepping onto a deck or a platform. You have the freedom to walk down the aisle. Think about an airplane. Yes, it's technically a giant flying metal tube, a massive container. But the fact that you can unbuckle your seatbelt and walk down the aisle to the restroom completely changes the physics of the language.
Because you're moving across the floor of the vehicle, the surface rule applies. You're on the bus, on the train, and on the airplane.
Now let's shift gears a bit for Section 3, Open Transport and Walking. What about travel methods that don't have walls at all? Let's explore how our physical movement changes the grammar when we aren't sitting inside a standard vehicle. For open transport, the surface rule is incredibly obvious. Think about a bicycle, a motorbike, or even an animal like a horse or an elephant. You're sitting completely exposed on top of the mode of travel. Even with a modern open-air vehicle like an e-rickshaw, you're stepping onto the floorboard and sitting on an open surface. The vulnerability of being exposed to the elements really cements why it's a surface. There's no enclosed container surrounding you, so you must use on.
Now let's contrast riding as a passenger with arriving by your own physical movement. In a great example from Arnold's Everyday English, she talks about meeting someone at a train station. If you arrive by your own power on foot, you don't use a riding preposition at all. You just say, "We can walk to the restaurant together." Notice how the language shifts when you become the engine. You aren't resting on a surface anymore. You are the dynamic movement. The action shifts from being supported by a vehicle surface to your own energy propelling you toward a place.
The journey's not quite over yet. Let's look at Section 4, Arriving at Your Destination.
Because arriving at your final destination requires its very own specific preposition logic. A massive mistake learners make is pulling out their phone and texting a friend, "I arrived to the airport." Remember the rule from English with Alex? When you travel, you go to a place, but you arrive at a specific point. The airport, the bus station, the office, they are all specific points on a map. Think back to our English Club framework from earlier. Points get the preposition at.
So the crucial point is knowing when a destination goes from being a point on a map to being an enclosed boundary. If you're traveling to a large geographical area, like a city, a country, or a region, you use in. You arrive in France. You arrive in Chicago. Think of the borders of France or the city limits of Chicago as the walls of a giant, invisible cardboard box. When you cross that border, you step inside the box. You're entering a massive geographical container.
Let's emphasize this with a quote from English with Alex, who hits the nail on the head here. He says, "You go to someone's house or to a place like the mall, but you arrive at a place." Why does this matter for you? Because once you realize prepositions aren't just frustrating random lists of tiny words you have to memorize, but actual physical maps of your body and space, you can logic your way through almost any sentence. They paint a picture of exactly how you're interacting with the environment around you.
So, the next time you step onto a train, climb into a taxi, or arrive at an airport, I want you to test this out. See the invisible containers and surfaces all around you. Once you see the spatial logic hiding behind the grammar, it all starts to make perfect sense. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. But it leaves us with one final fascinating question to ponder. If simple words like in and on are secretly governed by the laws of physics, what other hidden rules is the English language keeping from you? Keep exploring, and I'll catch you next time.